Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Welcome back, friends. Today we're in Los Angeles, right next to the airport because I had to change my hotel last minute. Thankfully, this worked out. Our timing got a little bit crazy because I'm talking with another parent who has to organize a whole bunch of things besides her business to make this work. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. A retired model who owns her own law agency, which I can't even imagine how much time went into creating that, how many people are involved and all that, and we'll get to it. So welcome to the show, Lorraine D'Alessio. Is that how you pronounce it?
Correct. D'Alessio, you got it.
I'm so bad at that. So in your own words, who are you and what are you passionate about?
Okay. I'm Lorraine D'Alessio, and I am very passionate about the law, fashion, tech, sports. I have the honor and opportunity to continually represent extraordinary people from all over the world that come to America and do great things, and I am a part of their journey, and it's a blessing.
Yeah, and so you're from Canada.
Yes.
Initially, right?
Yes.
And then you were modeling for a long period of time. So you have
Right.
like a lot of experience when it comes to like working in different countries and all the like legal stuff that kind of comes in. Tell me about the journey a little bit from that. How did you get into modeling? Like at what age? And what was your first experience trying to work outside of the country you were birthed in?
Okay. Are you an electronica fan at all?
I mean, I've interviewed some artists in that world.
So Richie Houghton, I got scouted by Ford models at a Richie Houghton electronica party. Could be construed as a rave as well. When I was about 14 years old.
And which city is this in?
Toronto.
That's where you're
Canada.
from?
Right.
Okay.
And so they pretty much signed me that same week, Wednesday. I remember it was like on the weekend, and Wednesday I was signed. And it just started from there.
Somebody just approached you and was like, hey.
It was just like, they said, you're Catwoman. And I'm like, I'm 14. I'm not really a woman, but they're like, you are Catwoman.
How did you trust that it was like legitimate? Did you get did they then contact your parents after the fact and you had to do all that like?
Well, it's all really interesting how that all came about. But they asked me to come to this on-call day. They're like, please, you got it. We have this commercial and you'd be perfect for it. I was with several people who were much older than me and knew of that person that approached me and said, oh, yeah, they're totally with the Ford agency. You got to think about going to that. So I did. And I'm a kid, right? So I notified my parents, and the compensations that they were offering for these jobs was astronomical compared to my $50 a month newspaper route that I was doing. So it was like thousands of dollars a shoot. My parents, who are very conservative, wonderful, incredible people, quite religious, took one look at the pay rates and were like, well, I think probably we can make this work. This could be your way, to university, etc. And we don't have to sweat it, with those fees. So that's where it all started. And really crossing international borders as a model. I mean, this one big shoot I did that was across all these European countries, and we were launching a luxury car brand for Volkswagen. I got to meet such incredible people all over the place and spend months, doing this incredible shoot. But I will say that having to encounter each time the problems at the border, the guys with the badges and the guns. I mean, this is not just entering into America, it's entering into many countries.
Right.
It's terrifying if you're there to do a job. If you're there to say, I'm going on vacation, it's a different matter. You're there, I'm coming to a job and I've got a whole production crew with me. You get treated a little bit differently, it tends to be. So I was thinking, gosh, there's got to be such a business with this.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just one talent.
Well, how old were you at this point in time, though?
So I modeled more heavily from the times of I was around 14 till 17, 18. And then I hit a pretty intense block at that point where I burned out a bit.
Yeah.
And I think it happens to a lot of models. And the industry is a lot also about events in the evening, let's say, and getting together with people who are a lot older than you. And it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I needed a bit of a break when I hit around 17. So I hunkered down. At that point, I was almost failing out of high school.
I was just going to ask how academia even worked with that, because this was like before online schooling was super common.
Yes, I had 57 absences in like my grade 11 year. I remember that. And the principal was like, we're probably going to have to throw you out of school, or, have a big serious talk with your parents. And I had to make a choice. And it wasn't just the modeling, it was also the community, the environment. And I had to make a choice to basically step away and go into like this intense study focused period. And that's around the time I also discovered I was ADHD. I never picked up on that as a kid. And my parents were just like, well, the teachers tell us that you don't listen. And I'm doing like multiple things at the same time. How is that possible? Maybe you should put your kid on meds. Thank God they didn't. Because I think that's where a lot of your creativity and out of the box thinking, especially as a lawyer, and I think even just as a business professional, you got to be a little bit like different.
I feel like people with ADHD usually struggle though with focusing specifically like on paperwork. I mean, I have a problem focusing on paperwork unless I'm super, super interested in it. And when it's legal jargon, as interesting as the subject is, just the way it's worded, I'm like, oh God, I can't pay attention. Is that something you were able to still do? Like, why were you able to do that? Or how?
You set up a process that works for you. For me, I don't just tackle a document just like A to Z. I first skim it. I do like first sentences. I have a highlighting system I do. I don't just internalize the information just like, all right, I'm going to read sentence by sentence. To me, that's boring, just like you said.
Yeah.
I want to get to the good stuff so then I could be like, okay, what do I really am interested about this document, no matter what it is, even if it's like a letter from an attorney general, I'm reading through and I want to get the good stuff out of it. And then that helps me advocate for my client because I'm able to pick out salient points pretty quickly, actually out of a document by my process. And then I also sometimes do, even to this day, cue cards, and it helps to break down the important points and any analysis I'm going to pull out of that.
Sure.
And I learned a lot about this in law school, actually. And it took me until law school. It was one of my professors in law school that was just like, how is it that you are acing this test like crazy, and on this other assignment, you're dying? And he's like, I just don't understand this. And he's like, I have ADHD. Maybe you do too, and let's get you tested. So that's how it all started.
Well, how long was that then? You graduated high school. Was it already at that point you were thinking like you want to go to law, or was this like a period of time before you decided to go to college?
I always wanted to be an advocate for people's rights. I just couldn't articulate it was to be an attorney or a lawyer, but I wanted to make a difference, make a mark, help people in the most like basic terms. That's what I wanted to do. And I think, being raised by evangelical, strong, religious, grounded family helped me a lot to think about what is my value system and how can I help people. I can live a very selfish-driven life, but how can... So I would say that the idea of being a lawyer was definitely formulated in my high school years. Even when I was 13, 12, I was thinking of that. And I just didn't know how or in what way. And I've always been a team player. So for me, like entrepreneurialism, like this kind of like team spirit, for me, entrepreneurialism is about mobilizing a team.
Yeah.
It's about leading and mobilizing a team. So that was just always my thing. And as a model, it's a very singular thing. But at the same time, smart models understand it's actually a business.
Yeah.
You are a business. You are a brand. And your agent is just one part of your A team. And you need to have a great lawyer. You need to have a PR person. You need to formulate this great group of people around you so that you can kill it. And you're not just killing it for yourself. You're killing it for the whole team. Everyone benefits.
Well, and it's not just you that is like this team underneath you always, right? Like it's always, I think, short-sighted when people think like, I need to succeed. But if all your friends are also succeeding, that probably is also going to help you succeed, right? So that's why like agencies sometimes are helpful
Indeed.
when there's a bunch of models there, because it's like,
Indeed.
well, I'm not concerned that I need to get this specifically,
Right.
because if my friend, who I also kind of cohabitate workspace with, and I'm in that network, if they got this opportunity, now all of a sudden they're going to be at this space in whatever country, and they're going to say, hey, do you know anyone that'd be good for this? Yep, I know somebody, and now you get brought up too,
Right,
So if you can be a
exactly.
part of something bigger, you're going to have many more opportunities to succeed, rather than if
Yeah.
you need to be this lone wolf type person.
Totally, absolutely. I so agree with that. And yeah, again, like I think like very successful models understand that it's not about taking, it's about actually giving, and understanding that your art, the way that you're maybe even making money off of your art, or the opportunities that you generate. I think models, there's something in common. When you walk in the room, people notice usually, and you're able to get things that I would say a lot of people might not have, and that can create opportunities for other people on your team. You know, the kind of conversations you have, the people that you're able to connect with, maybe they aren't yet connected with, that you can make introductions to or whatnot. And later on, a lot of the people that I worked with remembered me when I became a lawyer, because they were like, well, wait, I remember she was always on her A game. She always appreciated our time and what we're obviously our collective goals that we're trying to, achieve as well. And so when I became a lawyer, even when I was in law school, a lot of my colleagues and friends were like, hey, like, can you help me with this paperwork? Like, I'm dying. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Or everything from border to IP matters to contracts. But a lot of the border is really interesting. And I got stopped by this officer. He gave me a hard time, put me into detention for like 6-7 hours. Am I ever going to make it back to the US? Is there a way out of this? It's, I think that trust relationship, it can be years back and people remember it. They remember that you are a loyal, trustworthy person and are a giver and not a taker.
Well, it's all kind of part of the personal brand too, in the same way that some people trust different brands.
Yeah.
You know, if this brand that you trust all of a sudden makes something else, let's take it as a random example, Sony. You know, people respect that Sony projects, not everybody, but people respect that their products are good quality, right? So now if Sony makes a microwave and you're at the store, you're like, I know that brand. I trust that I've had good experiences with this brand before, even though it's not with this type of product, but that trust then translates over.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I always tell people one of the best skills you can possibly have and something you need to be able to do is sell yourself as a solution to people's needs, right? Because then they'll just come to you because they trust you, you know, and they know whether or not, even if Lorraine can't help with this problem personally, they trust your judgment on things. And they know that if you do have an answer for them through pointing to somebody else, then they're going to trust that, okay, I can trust this person too. Right. And that was kind of like how, you know, I met you through Johnny Rapp, who I interviewed, right? I trust Johnny's judgment because I had such a great experience with him. We've been friends and we still talk and whatever. And when I was like, hey, do you have anyone that you think would be a really great fit for the show? And he's like, you got to meet Lorraine. Then I was like, yep, I absolutely trust that I have to meet Lorraine. So thankfully that we're here. So how long did it take you? You went to college initially and got a bachelor's before you went to law school, or how did the schooling all work? Because that's a lot of schooling, right?
I even did a master's on top of that. Yeah.
So 4 years bachelor's, 3 years master's, 3 years plus, like how many years of schooling did you have to do?
I crunched my master's, my MPA, MBA. I crunched that into 1 year. So,
Whoa, okay.
So advocacy. I didn't quite know I wanted to be a lawyer yet, but I knew I wanted to help people make a difference. I need to get behind a cause, you know, and
right.
I knew it was something international. But anyway, so when I was in my undergraduate, I really enjoyed international politics. Political science was like my favorite subject. And I thought, okay, well, maybe perhaps I should actually become a campaign manager or, you know, assist a campaign for one of the officials who are trying to get in right now. And turns out, you know, Peter Fonseca and George Smitherman at the time for Canada were trying to get into government, into the Ontario government for Peter Fonseca and later on for George Smitherman federal, but mayoral and then provincial and then federal. But what was so interesting was I started, you know, getting into their campaigns and assisting and working with them, learning about the political process, and we did really well. And they actually got elected. And they remembered the good work that I did. So it's that. And so then once I was, kind of finished working with them, they knew I was on track to get a master's. And they said, you know what, keep in touch with us once you finish. So I just like fast tracked, did that, and then got shooted into like a pretty senior position as a policy analyst and advisor for the Ontario government. And I did that for about 3 years. And I really enjoyed it. And I met some of the best people to date in my life. And I was very grateful. It was on the bureaucracy side. So it was first the political legislative and then the bureaucratic, which was wonderful. But at the same time, I just knew I needed more in my life. And like I saw folks that were working in there like 20 years down the line. And I was like, so if I want to advocate for First Nations, if I want to join that rally or I want to do it, this could be a problem, right? They're like, yep. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a problem for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've ran into that with like small local stuff. When I got into my position with the Parks Commission, which is a small time thing, but when I got into it, there was paperwork that was like, you can't speak about certain things and you can't blah, 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 blah. And then I got thinking more about it because people have talked to me about doing city council stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to have to watch what I say publicly. I want to be able to say my mind and do what I want to do. And I think I can have a pretty big impact on my community and those around me without having the handcuffs of that.
Right.
So that translated into you deciding then, okay, I don't want to do politics. Was it at that point then you went to law school?
Right. So I was just like, well, I really want to be an advocate, and I appreciate so much what the OPS does. And I will always think back to all the relationships and what I learned, but I needed to be on the other side of the table. So that was when I made the decision to do my LSAT, and I locked myself up in a room in Detroit where my friend was just outside of Detroit in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Yeah. I was like, you know what, this is the perfect place. I'm going to hide in here. So I just like did the test, scored quite well, and then, went off to Southwestern Law School, which is a wonderful place for people that are more mature as students. So at the time, this was like a third career now, from fashion, government, now into law. So, and I will say, I didn't completely stop modeling. I actually still model, but I wasn't doing like the heavier stuff that I was doing before. So, and it started attending law school, and I just loved it. It was brutal, really hard, but at the same time, you knew that once you get out, I mean, with the Esquire, it's fabulous. I mean, you can really go to bat for people. There's all kinds of different areas of the law that you can get involved with. So as someone who just wants to make a difference, I mean, my God, like the world is your oyster on that. And I was honored to intern with Judge Preciado. This is one of the great things about Southwestern. I mean, is that they have the most judges in California as graduates of that law school, which is amazing. So when you go on to graduate, you have, if you're a good student, you have all these wonderful...
Yeah, there's a network already kind of there.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important side to see, the judges' perspectives and how they're dealing with cases. For Judge Preciado, he is incredibly accomplished in the employment law area, which was always fascinating to me from a employer perspective. He did a lot with government employee type stuff, but still, I think it's very transferable. But at the same time, while I was going to law school, I always kept up with my entertainment contacts. So, and immigration almost chose me in a way. I was always fascinated and interested in it. And in fact, I even interned as an undergraduate in an immigration law firm in Canada, quite interested in the whole refugee asylum stuff. But it really, again, came up in my life because when I was in law school, they were just like, I'm stuck at the port. You got to help me. And it was just like that tended to be like the most questions. So it really built from a network that I had developed earlier on. And, it went from like 6 clients. So I was interning with Carl Schusterman, who is like a legend, in the immigration field. And Thomas Joy took note of what I was doing, who was also a legend in the immigration, but also business law as well. And was just like, I don't think you should work for a firm anymore. In fact, I will go out with you and let's set up a law firm. And I mean, at one point I was bringing in 150 to 200 clients like in about a month and a half time. So it was like, okay, we can do this. We carefully put together the A team, certain paralegals that Tom knew. I mean, I knew of a young lawyer that I'd gone to law school with that I thought had a lot of promise, very smart to work with us. So we just put together a team of about 7 people. And then it just started growing, and we grew quite quickly, like 360% in just a few years.
Yeah. I mean, you're coming out of like not owning any real business outside
Right.
of like working for yourself, being your own personal brand, into now you're having all these people that went through all this schooling that are going to depend on you for employment and finding all these
Right.
contacts and putting yourself out there in that kind of way. That's like a pretty ridiculous challenge. Whoa, the confidence to try to come into that. Not only that, but I imagine, and I guess we should talk about this a little bit, I'm just like a white male in Wisconsin, so the amount of privilege is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not from like a super wealthy family, but I came from a very middle class. Both my parents worked for the government, so it was like, I know I have security. You know, like my dad lives on a cabin up in the middle of nowhere. So I have a lake home pretty much, you know, and I didn't have to do anything for it, and I'll just inherit it. So I have all these things. And when I go into situations, I never really feel that fight back or that question mark of people looking at me going, are you capable of this? Like I never really run into that. But I imagine being a model, like people look at pretty girls and they just assume they're dumb, which is horrible. But looking at them as like a model, and then you're going to start this law firm. Did you run into a lot of pushback, or was there a lot of stereotype things that were an issue?
Not at that time, funny enough, more now, but not at that time. And I think that what was so cool about how I look and my history, my background, is that I can identify with my clients so much, because it started with entertainment and then it morphed into tech and
But they
sports.
started like looking at you as a peer, kind of.
Very fashion. Yeah, exactly. So I've been through what they have gone through.
Right.
I mean, some of my clients are the top actresses and models in Canada, in France, in the UK, you know, many coming in from Central Europe. So it's like they feel bonded. And it's appropriation of voice. Like I've been through it. I've been through a lot of the stuff that they have been through. And now is their moment to open up the market of the United States of America. And that's a huge thing for them. So you are a piece of that process. And then you have also, you know, had a similar background. So they know I can do this too. That goes a long way in helping to not only sign the client, but also, you know, just to make the experience more encouraging and enriching. It helps with the confidence of the client. I've done it.
Was there like a huge need for that niche in particular that you identified at the time, that there just wasn't that many knowledgeable immigration lawyers for this type of work?
Well, I can tell you one thing, it was not popular. One of my mentors at the time, who ran his own firm that I interned with, was really not interested in entertainment, wanted to do more of the medical stuff, and is one of the top in the medical side, and everyone loves him for that, and that's great. But there were only, and there's still to this day, is only a very small number of firms that have the niche. And I think what also makes us quite unique is that we're knowledgeable on multiple sides, which is helpful. So clients don't have to like go searching. Again, it's their brand. It's not just about immigration. A lot of people don't understand the type of environment that they come into in Los Angeles. People are sizing you up. They're trying to figure out what you have, and they will try to steal ideas. They're going to try to steal work. They're going to do all kinds of different things. So you got to be prepared, not just from a visa standpoint, but also IP wise, also, you know, in terms of like, you want to be protecting yourself, possibly setting up certain trusts, depending on how big you've gotten or what you have. So I think it's formations, corporate formations. It's about how you're going to be looking at contracts. For many influencers that we represent, they're always being approached with like very boilerplate brand sponsorship deals. And some of them, they just think that you have no wiggle room for negotiation, but that's not always true.
And what is a boilerplate deal? What does that
Well,
mean?
with many of like the bigger brands, they come at you and, you know, if you want to work with us, you got to sign this, you know,
Okay, sure.
and you still want to go through it, and you still want to understand what it is, and you want to really look at it. Are there any non-competes in there? Are there exclusivity clauses? Like what am I heading into? You want to, and we have a firm and we have a network that helps to cover all those needs, which I think is vitally important, because you might not even know. You need to be educated when you come in. Oh, okay, like let me manage your expectations of what you're about to enter. You know?
Well, it's scary,
and
right?
It can get scary, but at the same time, it's really exciting, and there's loads of opportunity. You just want to keep the path nice and clear for yourself, and not get clouded by people that are trying to, get the best for themselves.
Right.
And I mean, maybe ultimately most people are trying to do that, but at the same time, you want to be most protected.
Yeah. I think people who are really successful look for mutually beneficial opportunities.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
They're going to win too, but that's okay.
Yes.
Because you're both winning.
Exactly.
That's the difference versus somebody that's coming and going, well, how do I win versus how do we win?
Right.
And then honestly, with the way networks work and stuff, word gets around pretty quick if you're out for yourself and not out for the team, right?
Indeed.
And when somebody's moving in from another country, that itself has got to be pretty scary of like, I don't know people here, I don't blah, 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 blah. If they can find somebody like you or your firm who they know, like, I at least have these people in my corner, And honestly, there's more than just that too, more than just the surface itself. It's now that I have this relationship, well, Lorraine knows this other person that I could trust and talk to that might be able to help me with something else and help me with this and that, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like putting yourself as, I can help you with all of this type of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So then how did the business scale? Because you said it grew fast. Were you in charge of hiring everybody? Or I mean, how did it all kind of grow?
So, we were getting a lot of cases, and we needed a bigger team in order to handle the cases, so that every case has a strong case manager, a strong attorney tied to the case. As much as I want to do everything, that's a sign of a great leader as well. You know the strength of your team. So the firm built alongside the growth. And, it helped a lot that I had this incredible mentor who pinpointed good people to bring into the firm from the beginning. And then I actually met a wonderful business coach. Getting through the pandemic was quite a thing, because you're doing international law. Borders are closing. Borders are closing. Consulates are closing.
Yeah.
I mean, most of our work starts with immigration. So, yeah, I mean, that was just devastating at first. I'll never forget the American Immigration Lawyers Association holding a virtual conference with all these lawyers who were watching, blank-faced, the world just shut down, and going, what do I do? This is my bread and butter. And, just trying to throw out tips as much as they could in terms of how to basically scale down your practice. And I think the smart ones, smart lawyers of the group, figured out quickly how to transition their teams, which is exactly what we did, to make them more agile to different time zones, because people are having heart attacks all over the world in different time zones as we adapt to changing government policies everywhere.
So were you finding new clients in other spaces? What you mean by transitioning them? Okay.
As well as team members. So we got really international. We went from most of our people being based in LA to almost half of our people being based in Asia. And so it was like LA, Palo Alto, Toronto, Kuala Lumpur, and then also Brazil and parts of Europe.
And you were hiring these people via FaceTime interviews? I would assume more than one, but I mean, like, it was all virtual?
100% virtual.
Wow.
Quickly transition your team, get them trained up so that you can service clients in different time zones as the needs are arising and as we identified the flows of business were coming. And, I also just had some incredible, wonderful business relationships with trustworthy people in these different parts of the world as well, which it's hard when you're not family. How do you build up? How do you do that? How do you build that up? So I mentioned a business coach that I had. She actually came in a little later after I had built this whole thing. And I'm like, I'm not sure if everything runs as efficiently as it should. And she's like, yeah, I have a feeling. And so she did kind of an audit on, how to make things even more efficient and effective and good for our team members and good for our clients. And it's been really tough to go through all through the phases of making things more streamlined and needs-based for the client, but it's worked quite well. So I've also had to do that. And I think humility is really important as a business leader. Humility and sensitivity. I feel like in modern day right now, a lot of stuff that is coming at you is like, you're so great. Tell yourself that every day. Tell yourself that you're going to be okay. Everything's great. You're wonderful. Keep repeating that. Meditate on it. Da, da, da. In fact, I think that's good. You want to build your confidence, but you also don't want to be a narcissist. And, you're not always right. And in fact, a lot of your team members will have great ideas and you need to absorb those. And you also need to admit when you're wrong. Yeah. So I do a lot of that, like assessing and reassessing where we're headed and, in the different areas of law of our practice. But we're still quite heavy. I mean, Canada, the US is a big market for us. Europe to the US, big market. Asia to the US, big market, and vice versa, and the other way. But for us, we have strong relationships internationally so that we can help people on both sides.
Yeah, it's understanding the whole picture and all the inner workings from the different angles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Since you already knew what it looked like to be a model, then coming in another country, you already had that kind of perspective. But then when you learn the law side, but then when you learn the politician side and how these laws are made and why and all this, it's like right. Once you understand all the workings, you can play the game a little bit better. Yeah. So how did your role transition as you got bigger? Did you no longer work with a whole lot of clients directly? How did you still manage working with people directly, clients directly, but then managing all these people? How did your role change?
Yeah. My expertise is not operations. I figured that out early on, finding great operations managers to work with and put them as team leads, and then more senior managers over them. It's a very responsive organization, I want to say, an interactive organization with the different layers. So I started working with tech companies and scaling companies. The founders and usually like their heads of HR or whatever counsel is, there's, often counsels that they already have at their LinkedIn, but they don't do everything. They also want to know that you understand where they're coming from. So as an entrepreneur, they really respect that, and that you've been able to scale your business and have a stable, successful business that is either something that they are working on or they've already done, and they're at a certain point and now they're, doing even better type thing. So I think that just as the firm has grown, we've also come to be appreciated by more and more companies, and like those in the fashion. So I was representing a lot of models, which is great, and it still continues to be wonderful. But then I started signing a lot of like fashion designers with their own companies that are international, and then management companies that are brands, that are bigger brands. So you go from like fashion designers, more small businesses, to like ginormous corporations worldwide. And so I think, it's all been a learning process, but at the same time, your client doesn't expect you. I mean, I think there's definitely a mutual respect there, and like, okay, we're on the same level, like we get each other, that's cool. And, I don't sign like all the business, do not. I have other lawyers that work with me, and they, are on the sales side, I want to say, as well. And then when we have like paralegals and legal assistants and that sort of stuff that help to get the work out the door. But the attorneys are pretty hands-on in terms of always making sure that every layer, is reviewed and signed off on and all of that. So it's, you got to have that quality control, and also be ready and agile for different changes in the case.
Well,
there's all kinds of things that will come up, totally. A to Z on any particular case. So yeah, and I would say that I team sports. There's like a Harvard Review study that went out on successful women and CEOs, and what is in common with successful female CEOs in their background, their upbringing, whatever. And if you read it, that study that they did, you'll see that what they discovered was that these women have all excelled in this particular study they did with team sports at a pretty competitive level. So it wasn't just any sport, team sports, and identified leaders on those teams tended to go on and become CEOs. So I believe in that. I was very competitive in volleyball as well, on top of everything else, and soccer. Those are like my two. And on volleyball, I went really quite far where I'm from in Canada. So I think that there's so many transferable values, skills, type things that team camaraderie, culture, like that makes sense to me. So yes, I didn't run a company growing up. I had a few uncles who ran companies, but they did not take me under their wing and show me really how they did it. I just sort of observed from afar, but I didn't really even see them that much. So I don't know. So I would say just some wonderful people around me, great friends, lovers, et cetera, that had other businesses that I learned from. But also I would say that experience in team sports, very transferable and good.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything you've done in your life is a stepping stone to where you get to.
Yeah.
And you can't identify in the moment how this thing is going to translate, but usually it will in some kind of way.
Yeah.
I opened my skateboard shop and I had to throw these fundraisers, skate contests, right? Because I do all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
The first skateboard contest I threw, I didn't even think about it until I'm at the contest. And I'm like, I don't have anyone to be on a microphone. Oh, I guess I'll get on a microphone today, and then that skill ended up translating way later into me doing this radio show where I'm traveling all over the world, but it's not something I would have thought about at the time.
Wow.
So all these things they do kind of, and that's why I always try to tell people too, like when you look at where you want to go way off in the distance, and sometimes people will be like, when they're going to college or something, right? They'll just get a whatever job, something that's unrelated.
Exactly.
And I'm like, but you could get a job that's in that field or that's teaching you a skill or putting you in the network towards where you want to go.
Yeah.
Even if you're making $2-3 less an hour, what does it matter? Because you're focused on this thing, right?
Yeah.
So all those things matter. But I want to know, how did the things change? Because businesses have to change and evolve. Obviously, you talked about like the pandemic. That was huge. That's what changed it to be more international than it was before. But how did your vision change from what you wanted to do when you set out to like start the law firm, what your goals were versus what your goals are now?
So I think what changed a lot is actually the pandemic that helped to change what my goals were. At one point, it was just to grow this ginormous international firm in very important hub cities that were focused on transcending borders for extraordinary people in the smoothest way possible. Sort of that A to Z type care, whether we're providing it or we're giving them strategic assistance to trustworthy, partners that we have within our network so that they're able to set up their business, and be successful. And so that still remains to some extent, but I think what's changed, I guess, for the goals of my business is I don't think bigger is necessarily better.
Agreed.
And so, at one point I had 65 people on Wilshire Boulevard, Savicente and Wilshire. The overhead was suffocating. It put tremendous pressure on myself and another attorney in particular that I used to work with. And I think when business is being thrown at you, it's really exciting. It's awesome. You're growing. But at the same time, you got to manage the growth and figure out how to keep a pace that is actually healthy, not just for yourself and reaching the goals of the team, but ultimately maybe just slow it down, and don't be on to the next thing, but take a step back for a second and figure out your best and brightest on the team, streamline, and still you can provide this a wonderful service to a network of clients internationally that you service internationally with offices internationally, but maybe try to stay more boutique.
Yeah. Well, I think in general, people think of a goal, right? But their perspective is hard, right?
Yeah.
They see this mountain that's super far in the distance. They can't see the details around this mountain yet because it's so far away.
Yeah.
As they're running, they look down, they're looking at their feet. And as they come up closer, a lot of times they don't ever look up again. They just keep running, and then all of a sudden they're way down the road. They look up and they're like, why did I even run here?
Yeah.
This isn't what I actually want. What am I thinking, But they just don't slow down because they have all these pressures from around them, the general capitalist society and capitalist America that tells you you should just make more money and you need to be more successful in these kinds of ways. When we were talking off mic before, success is whatever it is in your mind. And that doesn't have to be any certain kind of mold. I have a house that, all my kids have their own bedrooms and we have a playground in the backyard. I have what I want out of that. I don't need it to be more. So my goals financially are different than a lot of people. And that doesn't make somebody else's goals wrong. It doesn't make mine wrong, right? It's just slowing down to be able to figure out, am I actually working towards the goals that I want at this point? Have my goals changed? And if they have, that's totally fine, and that's natural, and that's normal. In our lives, we rarely, if ever, go in one direction. You're kind of meant to meander around, enjoy the whole journey of the whole thing. Yeah, you always want to be working towards something, right? But that can change. That's very malleable.
Yeah.
So as things have gone by, you've really started to help a pretty wide variety of clients, right? It started with models, but it really moved to all these different countries, where every time you have someone from a different country, now there's different laws and stuff that you kind of have to look at, different stipulations to all this. But now you're like helping NBA or WNBA players and stuff. How did that come up? Was it just like part of a regular network where all of a sudden somebody knew somebody that was a player and they needed help, and hey, meet Lorraine?
Yeah. So, again, I played sports when I was younger, and I did play some basketball as well. But I'm just a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of basketball. And I see how the WNBA is just primed so well right now. And I feel that there will be more and more, money to be earned by female basketball players. There's going to hopefully be a leveling of the playing field with perhaps the actual NBA, male side of the NBA, at one point soon. And there's just like incredible players that are coming up, on the Sparks. And I think there needs to be more, female NBA agents that, again, there's like kind of that appropriation of voice, women in sports, women that have been in sports, women that have run companies, women that know what it takes for a talent to get to that point in their career that they're just really blossoming, able to just focus on their sport, and, we handle the rest. So I wanted to be a part of that journey. And I was super inspired by the story of Eddie Kim, who's the principal for Big Game Management, his background in the military, as well as prior to that being a champion swimmer and very high up in all the swimming circuit. And the work that he was doing with his players, which is he doesn't always take the players that are at the very, very top. He's willing to help those that are showing a tremendous amount of potential. It's WNBA, but we're also working with baseball players and those that are being vetted by some pretty big teams right now. Of course, it's 'tis the season right now. So, and to be able to explain, okay, so this is happening to you right now, and this is happening to you right now. This is where you're positioned. This is now what you want to show them to get to the next level. So when you're talking to a 19-year-old, a 21-year-old, their family may or may not, some fathers, they spend a lot of time training their kids. I find that the moms are more kind of strategic about who they're allying with and like the relationships. I find that that's like a common pattern. Sure. But they want to, again, have trustworthy relationships with people that are going to help their child really get to that next level. And a lot of these folks have already invested a ginormous amount of time to building to this point. So, they're 19, 20, 21, they're young, but at the same time, they've been at the sport, showing their stuff for years and, doing those 5 a.m. practices and 3 times a week. And the families have driven across the country, all of that to keep it all going on a constant basis, maneuver. So they want and need representatives who have gone through this, know what they've invested in, and have the know-how on how to make those next steps to get the talent to where they need to be, great and national class or world class, depending on what the goals are. So I just feel that, in terms of brand sponsorship, monies that are coming into various leagues, I was particularly drawn to the WNBA. And I know we see Magic Johnson and his major commitment to the Sparks. And I think that this is 2022 and, we're going to see a lot, I think, in women's basketball. And I'm excited. What's really fascinating to me as well is how I think the pandemic has also changed sports quite a bit. I mean, it's live sports, but also, they've signed off on, gaming, like gambling as okay, we're going to open up the doors to all this. So, which I think also brings in a lot of funds into sports. And I know. So I think it's an interesting time for players because it's just a ginormous amount of investment going into their training, going into the commitment. So yeah, I want to be a part of that, as well as identifying those potentials that could also be worldwide coming in to the US and showing their stuff. It's incredible, like the percentages of foreign talent that actually make up many of these major leagues.
And it's only going to get higher.
Yeah.
As these things become more available, the world becomes smaller. You know, people in these other countries now growing up dream of coming and playing in the WNBA. It's actually on their radar versus it didn't used to be. So this demand's only going to go up and up and up and up. And I think, like, obviously we're always trying to fight towards gender equality, and in professional sports it's just like one of the more glaringly obvious inequalities. And WNBA players, a lot of the problem is a lot of them make very little income. I think people don't realize how, like, I don't know, do you know offhand the medium, like, average income? I mean, there's a wide variety, right? But the average is so much lower than something like NBA that in order to get that to raise, there's a lot of parties involved, right? But by having agencies, law firms, those people that represent these players who are drastically underpaid, fighting for them, and in a position where they're like knowledgeable about why they can fight for them, what they can get for them, that's a big part of the key to getting this equality to get closer.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So it is really important from that side alone, let alone whether or not you make money from it. It goes back to like doing something you're passionate about, something that makes you feel like you have a purpose.
Yeah,
because you're leaving an impact.
Yeah,
which again, that's something different than you could do from politics, because now you can do it privately. And you can identify all these people and say, I want to help you.
Yeah.
And because I believe in you and what you're going to do. And I want to help you. You know what I mean? So it kind of puts you in that position. Yeah. On the other side of what you do, you mentioned to me that you've been doing a lot of public speaking, or used to do a lot of public speaking, but you want to do more public speaking. What are you public speaking about?
Getting back into the saddle, so to speak. Right. So everything from immigration law matters to, obviously the management side on sports. I have a whole series of, speaking I'm doing through Canada at the moment as actually going more back to my roots, to actors and models who are, now that the borders are open, now that they're able to, kind of go for that part or whatever, what those steps are, and getting them the information that they need in order to prep now so that they can do it. There's all kinds of things that people can do even when they might not be ready at this exact moment to sign. And that even goes for, players on the management side, what they need to be doing with their shooting, averages, or their, or their batting averages, or whatnot in their training, what they should be working towards, what numbers matter. And I mean, I hate being a numbers person, but at the end of the day, sometimes you need to just know those. And it goes for law too. You should have this many supporters in order to get this many letters so that we can file this application and get you this benefit, and you're not born to know this, but I'm going to tell you what it is so that you can put it into your game plan, and we can then circle back and I'll see what you got and we can move to the next step. So, I have a lot of relationships with consulates and governments, and I do, speaking on that side, also with many unions and, chambers of commerce. There's actually 14 chambers of commerce that I'm going to be doing a whole slew of speaking events with, that are now finally opening up for like in-person speaking seminars and conferences. So it's more of a great opportunity to just give back as well. Here's some information which will help you on your journey. This is what I help people do. Even if you're not ready at this moment, this is some stuff that will help you be on that level playing field to get started. I find people just really appreciate, I can't tell you how many clients I have that heard me speak 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, pre-pandemic, and then like literally keep all the information and shoot me an email and be like, thank you so much, like, for telling me this. Let's circle back. This is where I'm at now. What do you think? Or just to thank me, because they were like, no other professional took the time to give this information. And they just kind of purposely, what a lot of them complain is like particularly legal professionals will kind of make things sound more confusing and full of fear to kind of scare you. And I'm more like, you can do this. I've done it. Yeah. Here's some information to help you chart out the next steps. These are the steps that I'd probably recommend you be taking, more from a general information standpoint. And then let's recircle and sit down one-on-one and chat about your particular situation and kind of like what the timeline and next step should be. So I think it moves mountains for, a lot of people have many goals and have many dreams, but they don't know how to effectively put together those action steps for a plan to get there.
Yeah.
And because they just don't know.
Of course.
So how do I do this? And the internet has so much crazy wrong information all over it. And some is right. Some sites are actually good, but how do you sift through it all? And you're kind of like, well, I guess this kind of makes sense. Maybe I should follow that. It's like, no, you can waste a tremendous amount of time, and time is money. You can become frustrated, overwhelmed, and ultimately step away. So I'm excited. I'm excited about all these chats I'm doing and the people I'll meet.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for every thank you that you got, there's 20 other people that just never message you. You don't know the impact that you have on people, even if it was just like you had this conversation or they heard you say this thing and it's in their subconscious. They don't even remember that it was you that helped them with this thing. But that's not what's important. What's important is that it did help. But that's the cool thing is you don't really know how much. As far as like people not being able to understand the legal things and there's all this misinformation on the internet, we don't need to talk about this long, but are there any resources that you would tell people to point to that would help them with this stuff? Not necessarily that this is going to help with this exact form, but how they can learn basic knowledge for how to read stuff or any pointers?
We actually have I think it's almost 300 pages of content on our site on purpose. So
what's the website name?
www.DALESSIOLawgroup.com. So DalessioLawgroup.com. On purpose, we put that there so that people can read, get information, and become knowledgeable so that when they're talking to a lawyer or a representative, like you're able to ask productive questions. And that's important. You want to ask the right questions. We're going to try to take you through kind of a good A to Z type consultation, but at the same time, we don't know what necessarily maybe all the different circumstances and things that you're going through in your life. So I think it helps people to come in with a preset, okay, these are some things that I'm definitely going to want to hit so that when we're chatting, it's especially fulfilling and, going to set you on the right track. So I'd say our website is good. There is also some federal regulation websites that I can give you for compliance in terms of IP that would be good to look at. USCIS itself has a good site, and that's more for the immigration side, not so much IP and business, but that would be, helpful. And, sometimes it can get quite convoluted though. So this is why I'm doing also more speaking online as well. So I think I just shot 6 videos. I just shot 6 videos, everything from business of contracts to immigration. And Eddie actually has a series of chats that he's put out as well on management. I'd take a listen as well. I think that would be good. And then just to take in the consult. Some people are just afraid to chat with lawyers. There's all these myths around lawyers, but usually those first consultations are either complimentary or there will be some credit. So it's not like you're losing the money. There's some credit to something down the road that you could be majorly benefiting from. So I just take in, and like I said, for those people that are previously reaching out to me saying thank you, a lot of those people I'll have had done those consultations with way back, and they have all those meticulous notes from that time that we talked, and they've carefully gone through and hit all the stuff that they thought that we took away from that they needed to get done. So I think that it's been quite valuable from what I can see.
Yeah. Well, I think it's valuing your own time and valuing the lawyer's time when you're going in prepared, where you're not just having a conversation of, well, tell me about everything.
Yeah.
You're going in and you're like, okay, well, if I'm going to be paying X amount per hour, maybe I should try to have this conversation be as productive as possible in the time frame. But again, it's not just about the money. It's about respecting everybody's time involved.
Yeah.
If these other resources are available to me and I know that I'm capable of at least doing some of this on my own, I should respect myself enough to say, I'm up to this challenge. The things I don't understand, I'll write down, and then I'll ask those questions. So I think it's just being smart about that.
I do have my book transcript. I'm happy to, for those folks that want to contact me, happy to give it to them. So, and that's for the immigration side and going global. So I think it would be good to, as a good resource. I'm happy to for anyone that's listening.
So how can people, and actually, well, I'm going to ask this question, then I'll ask one more, but how can people best get in contact with you if they want to reach out about that book or any other random tips? Obviously, they're not going to be DMing back and forth for hours about legal advice, but if they wanted to follow you, see what you do, see what events you're going to be speaking at, and how could they get in contact? What's the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. Email is really good. And on our site, there's just a consultation window. You can just jump on there and just put your name in, and you'll be fed right through to our calendar, either my calendar, or depending whatever the question is, routed to someone in our office that, specializes in that particular area. So it's Lorraine at DalessioLawGroup.com, or you can just go on to the website that I mentioned. It's DalessioLawGroup.com. There's another one for the immigration side, which is DLGimmigration.com. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So the last question, this is my favorite question of the show. I think when you do things you're passionate about, you get to have really unique experiences that are very meaningful to you, which is why you get juiced about like, okay, this is why I do what I do, right? Yeah. So can you share a story of a unique experience that happened to you that you're really grateful for, but it only happened because you chose to pursue this path?
All right. It was meeting Erin Brockovich, I'd say. I got to meet her. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I got to meet her. She was very inspiring. I mean, she came from a background that had absolutely nothing to do with law, but just was very impassioned by a human rights situation.
I didn't even know that was like based on a true story.
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
It was. Yeah, I met Erin Brockovich, and I think that it was a huge motivator. And I had already accomplished some stuff towards this goal already when I met her, but it helped a lot because I said, is there anything, I told her about me, told her where I was at in my life. And I said, is there any advice that you could give me? And she leaned in close and she said, just keep pushing. And when they push back, just keep pushing harder. Just never stop pushing. And it reminds me of this mentor that I had, this other mentor has, and his he was actually Malaysian South African. And he would say, another day, another fight, meaning like, this is a reality of it. Like, and you expect this, but don't get beaten down, because even these great mentors and these great, like Erin Brockovich, I mean, super successful, won a huge case, amazing, but she had constant challenges too. It wasn't like in the movie where, the way they portray it, I mean, she escalated pretty quickly to success, but, went through tough times, but, the chronicling the kind of day-to-day reality, so, and when that helped a lot for me. It's just like, okay, I might be more in a similar situation to these people than I might have thought.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is, if it's not hard, you're not learning.
Right.
So the second you get to a point where you're like, man, I'm just coasting right now, you're not continuing to grow anymore. So maybe it's time to pick something up. Maybe you know everything about this particular part of law. Well, if you want to take on other clients in a different range, you got to learn about this other thing, right? So it's just, the world's supposed to be like that. It's not supposed to be smooth sailing. If it's smooth sailing, you found something way too cushy, and you're not going to accomplish that much in your life.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to come over to me.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously, I got to get to the airport as I get back to Wisconsin.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.